Welcome to Shred Show, where the production value is about 1/16th the production value of a Shred Talks episode. And Shred Nation, what better way to follow up an interview with Daniel Thomson than to get really detailed on one of his shapes, as if there weren't already enough reasons this month to talk about Firewire or Tomo or Kelly Slater. As many of you know, the board that Kelly was surfing around Snapper Rocks and D-Ba earlier this month is called the Evo. You can see two of them right now lying on the grass above this Vader. And since you can't go into a surf shop yet and see the Evo, we'll talk about a Vader today because there's about 15 of them at Surf Ride, ranging in sizes from 6'1 down to 4'10. If you haven't seen this board being surfed before, here it is under the feet of Stu Kennedy. We'll show more clips of this board being ridden later, but first let's get into how this board is made. Look at any Vader in surf shops today and you'll see this black stripe across the entire bottom of the board. Firewire paints this stripe on boards that are built in their linear flex technology, which you'll find on some other Firewire boards as well, such as the baked potato that we see here. And it represents a strip of high density foam laid down the center of the board where you would normally find a wooden stringer in a traditional PU polyboard. Now, if you can get over the tragedy of knowing that a surfboard was cut clean in half to create the photo that I'm about to show you, you can see that piece of foam running through the board from nose to tail where a stringer would normally be. You can also see that it does not extend fully to the deck of the board like a normal stringer does. So the question is, if you're Firewire, why would you build a board this way? And if you're a surfer, why would you care? Well, if you've ever experienced the joy of having perfect footwells beneath your front foot from where the heel of your foot and the ball of your foot create perfect little indentations where you normally place your foot, you know how nice that is to have a really natural down in the board feeling beneath your front foot. Of course, it comes from just using the board over time and slowly compressing the fiberglass and the foam beneath your heel and the ball of your foot. The problem with that is that wooden stringers do not compress the same way that fiberglass and foam does, so you end up with this ridging effect where the board dips in under the ball of your foot and dips in under the heel of your foot, but you kind of have this arch support from the wooden stringer down the center of the board, again, if we're talking a traditional PU polyboard. And over time, that can just cause fiberglass to crack along the wooden stringer. By building a board this way, the idea is you can create an opportunity for your foot to more evenly compress the deck of the board, thus increasing the life of the deck, and also creating an even cozier home for your foot. Furthermore, Firewire calls this dense foam across the bottom of the board a springer instead of a stringer, because it's made of an aerospace composite that's meant to promote flex and bend in the board instead of preventing flex like a traditional wooden center stringer would do. Now, leaving TimberTech out of the conversation for a second, you would probably compare these LFT boards to Firewire's FST construction, which is the more easily recognizable Firewire build that we're most used to seeing with the wooden rails that you see here. The main difference between these two methods of building boards is that the LFT construction has a softer flex to it so that the board bends and changes shape more while you're surfing it, while the boards in FST construction, which stands for Future Shapes Technology, feel a bit more stiff and firm. Now, is one method of building boards better than the other? No, you just may notice, if you've been surfing for a while and you've ridden a lot of boards, that you could surf the same shape in two different constructions and really like how one feels over the other. For example, both Michelle Perez and Sally Fitz surf mostly FST boards with an occasional TimberTech thrown in, while Stu Kennedy, who we see here on a Vader, as well as Dan Thomson, like the way LFT boards bend and load up when put into turns. Now, even though you may be struck by just how uncommon shapes like this look, they actually operate on a pretty simple principle. From the moment that water enters the front of the surfboard until the moment that that water exits the tail of the surfboard, that water is being channeled through a comparatively wide surface from the nose all the way through to the tail. When you're comparing this type of a shape to a more traditional traditionally outlined board, like a hashtag or a Pisalian, for example. And in this shape, that equals a whole lot of speed and forward motion and more speed and more forward motion. Basically, everything about this outline is designed to plane easily on top of the water with speed without any drawn-in narrowing tail designed to sink more or any pointy nose designed to just get out of the way. In fact, every aspect of this outline is designed to be used while you're surfing it. For example, we can see Dan Thomson now doing a bottom turn that uses the entire rail of his board from nose to tail. Now, if you compare this shape to a Vanguard and look at it with your naked eye instead of my camera, which was subject to overhead lighting in this picture, you could notice that the Vader on the left seems to have a tail rocker that curves up and away from the floor more than the Vanguard's tail rocker on the right. And you can see the same thing if you look at the nose rocker. There's just slightly more curve as the board goes up towards the nose. If you look at the outline of these two boards side by side, you can see that they're near identical, with the tail shape being the only immediately noticeable difference. So really, you've got nearly the same outline placed on different rocker templates, and we know what this means. You may feel a tendency for more straight line glide and drive while you're surfing a Vanguard, while you may feel the Vader's rocker curve allow you to pivot off the bottom and climb the face with a tighter angle more quickly, and you may feel like it's inclined to fit into tighter, more compact cutbacks on the shoulder, while on the Vanguard you may feel your turns being drawn out just a little bit more. Glancing at the tail on this board, we can see that this diamond tail removes those double diamonds that used to be here and here on the Vanguard. So that may take away some of the hold in the face of a steep, round wave that's so useful for tracking across the face of the wave. And it might make this board feel like it releases off of a straight line quicker, or like it's easier to slide around and get into a groove on a flat-faced wave. Now, if you look at dimensions on these boards, you find that a Vader is about 1/8 of an inch wider and 1/8 of an inch thicker than a Vanguard if you're comparing across the same length. So when you surf a Vader, you're compressing more foam and float into a shorter length, and that may make you feel like you're slightly more on top of the water than if you were surfing a Vanguard. So you may be able to find more uses for a Vader when the waves are below chest high. Now, the bottom contours are really obvious on this board, and if you wonder why you see so many channels running through the tail like that, some would say that when you add more channels like this, you're making the board more easy to maneuver more immediately because of the way that you're breaking up water flow into all these little water flows, which makes it easier to control so much water flowing across so wide of a tail beneath your back foot. If you look at the shape of these channels, you can also see that they have an ability to hook and grip the water, kind of similar to how fins do, preventing all of the slide that you might feel if this just ran flat all through here. Now, speaking of fins, you can lurk around on Dan's Instagram and see that he's most recently surfing his Vader with a set of firewire thrusters, while also sometimes riding it as a quad with John fronts and Honeycomb 4.0 trailers. All three of these fin sets from Futures have ride numbers in the neutral range between 4 and 7, which could make sense because as the planing surface on this shape stays very wide from the moment water enters it to the moment water exits it, you'd most likely want fins that either let you feel the naturally speedy character of this shape between 4 and 7, or fins that help you control all the speed this shape gives you below number 4. For example, the YU TechFlex set with its ride number of 3.5 that we've seen Stu Kennedy using in this board throughout all these clips that we've been watching of him. To start wrapping this up, I think that because of the diamond tail on this shape, along with the increased tail rocker and the way that these concaves break up, or channels I should say, break up water flow through the tail, coupled with the slightly fuller dimensions on this shape when compared to a Vanguard, you'd likely find this board a little bit easier to surf and do things on other than just go fast down the line when you're comparing it to a Vanguard, especially for surfers who are more front foot oriented or neutral, without that lead back foot and really powerful legs that are helpful when surfing the Vanguard with its lower rocker and double diamond tails. If you're still wondering what this shape might feel like when compared to your more standard board like a Dominator or a Pisalian or a Hashtag, consider that this board becomes around 1 inch or more narrower than what you're normally riding. So when you're pumping along the face like this going down the line, you may really distinctly notice just how narrow it is here because there's nothing hanging up in the face of the wave when you're pumping off the bottom. You could also notice with so much tail width back here that even when you're weighting down the tail heavily, this board very naturally scoots forward through whatever maneuver that you're doing. That means that if you're used to doing a cutback on the shoulder of the wave and wrapping back around and hitting the whitewater over here, you may notice how this board comes out of those cutbacks right about at this point with a little bit more speed and drive heading back towards the whitewater. When it comes to sizing these for yourself, you want to set the board on the floor and have the nose hit you somewhere between your nose and your chin right here. I've had fun on this board sized like this, but I am very curious to surf it an inch shorter and lower than what my normal volume is, even lower than what my normal low end of my volume is. That's because I think if you're going to commit to surfing something so unique and interesting, it's important to remember that when you're surfing pretty good waves, paddling requires more volume than actually surfing the wave does. And you might find this shape most exciting if you suck it up and do the work that it takes to paddle a board that has less volume in it, and then experience the modern planing hole as you're surfing the wave in the smallest dimensions possible. But Shred Nation, it matters what you think too, so if you own or have demoed either a Vader or a Vanguard, drop a YouTube comment down below telling us how you sized it for yourself and what your surfing felt like on it. At the end of the week, we'll pick one of you at random to win a Futures thruster set, whatever ride number, size, and fin set you ask for. We'll also send you your choice of either the new single fin t-shirt by Surf Ride or the Shaka t-shirt by Surf Ride in the color white because springtime has been toasty here in Southern California and it is too hot for black tees at the beach. That's it for this episode, Shred Nation. I hope the waves are up and the tacos are tasty and the traffic is not bad on the way to the beach wherever you call home. We can't wait to see you here again on Shred Show.